I now declare open the public hearing of the Standing Committee on Education's inquiry into building Asia capability in Australia through the education system and beyond. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands in which we meet today and pay respect to the elders past and present of Indigenous peoples all across Australia. This hearing will be audio broadcast and a transcript of proceedings will be published on the Parliament's website. I invite members of the committee present here today to introduce themselves.
Kate Chaney, Member for Curtin in Western Australia.
Okay. Tim Watts, Member for Gellibrand in Melbourne's West.
Zee Soon, the Member for Banks in southwestern Sydney.
And Karina Garland, the Member for Chisholm in Melbourne.
I now welcome representatives from the Australian Public Service Commission to give evidence. For the benefit of Hansard, would you please state your full name and the capacity in which you are appearing before the committee?
Thank you, Chair. Rachel Bacon, Deputy Commissioner, Australian Public Service Commission.
And Kate Boxall, Assistant Commissioner, Leadership and Talent.
And Kristen Risby, Director of Capability Strategy and Insights.
Oh, thank you for your attendance here today. This hearing is a legal proceeding of the Parliament and has the same standing as proceedings of the House. The giving of false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as a contempt of Parliament. The evidence given today will be recorded by Hansard and attracts parliamentary privilege. Do you wish to make an opening statement before we proceed to discussions?
Thank you very much, Chair. We definitely have an opening statement that's quite short. If it helps you, it might just give a bit of context to the work that we do. Okay. So thank you, Chair and members of the committee for the opportunity to appear today. Building capability to work effectively in our region has been a long-standing priority for the Australian Public Service across successive governments. Since at least the Australia in the Asian Century White Paper in 2012, there's been clear recognition that Australia's prosperity and security are closely tied to the region. The Australian Public Service Commissioner has a statutory role to play in fostering leadership and high-quality learning and development, working with foreign governments on leadership and public sector workforce matters, and fostering an Australian public service workforce that reflects the diversity of the Australian population, all of which shape our approach to building and deploying critical Asia capabilities. Aligned with our statutory role and with an investment through the Capability Reinvestment Fund established under the government's public sector reform agenda and program, the Commission's contribution to Asia capability in the public service is delivered through three key streams in order to better prepare the Australian Public Service for current and future challenges. So firstly, under the Capability Reinvestment Fund, Asia and the Pacific capability was an identified priority.
Apologies, we need to adjourn for a division.
Thank you, Chair.
I temporarily adjourn the hearing for the division, and we will resume the hearing when the division is resolved. Apologies. The hearing.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I was just talking about the 3 streams of work at the Commission, and the first one I was just about to take you through was under the Capability Reinvestment Fund. Asia and the Pacific capability was an identified priority. So in partnership with DFAT, the Australian Public Service Commission delivered targeted development programs for public service employees, including the APS Indo-Pacific Executive Development Program and the Pacific Engagement Building Long-Term Relationships Through Cultural Capability Micro-Credential Program. Rather than being oriented to officers who already have a clear international focus, these programs aimed at building a workforce with deep knowledge of and experience in our region, focused on uplifting capability, networks and understandings in domestic agencies to be more outward-looking. These programs have delivered excellent results, providing APS employees with targeted learning to build strategic regional literacy, cultural competence and the practical skills leaders need to operate in complex regional environments. The long-term benefits of these programs will be seen in a more strategically aware and culturally competent workforce that's better equipped to advance Australia's interests in our region. Second, through our international partnerships, we work directly with public sectors across Asia and the Pacific. These engagements strengthen public administration in neighbouring countries while providing reciprocal learning that deepens Australian public service understanding of regional systems, cultures and institutions, reinforcing the focus on relationships, immersion and context beyond language alone. With our work increasingly having global aspects, Asia and Pacific capability, the region that matters most to our interests, needs to be a core capability of public servants. While the focus of our international work is to provide support to our regional partners, APS employees have valuable opportunities to build cultural awareness and establishing long-lasting and progressively stronger connections with officials and organisations. The APSC works with DFAT to develop public sector capacity in the region through coordinated programs and engagement with Indonesia, ASEAN, Papua New Guinea and 8 countries in the Pacific. The primary objective of this engagement is to assist regional counterparts to enhance their public sector institutions, policies and practices. Typically, efforts involve sharing valuable insights on agreed areas of interest, encompassing policies, practices, perspectives and lessons learned. Our engagements have included working closely with the Indonesian government since 2006 on civil service legislation, helping the Indonesian Civil Service Commission and in recent years assisting them with their journey towards accession at the OECD. The third area is that we're embedding inclusive practice and cultural capability throughout the Australian Public Service through our called Employment Strategy and Action Plan. Practical initiatives such as the EL2 called Pilot Many Cultures One APS, a storytelling initiative to build understanding and trust, and leadership programs that strengthen pathways for culturally diverse talent, extending lessons learned from our progress on gender and First Nations leadership. This work ensures the APS better reflects the community it serves and values the skills and perspectives of the Asian Australian diaspora and Australians with deep regional experience. Developing Asia and the Pacific capability in all APS employees is essential to ensure Australia is engaged, influential and well prepared to address the complex challenges and opportunities of the future. Now, we understand the committee has heard that capability pressures are intensifying. Within this context, the Commission and the APS Academy continue to support the service to strengthen Asia capability alongside delivery partners including DFAT and the Department of Defence. Through our programs, international partnerships and cultural capability work, we're contributing to an Australian public service that's more diverse, culturally confident, regionally literate and ready to serve Australia in an increasingly complex Asia-Pacific region. We welcome the opportunity to support this inquiry and look forward to your questions. Thank you, Chair, and I'm happy to table a copy of the opening statement if that's helpful.
Wonderful, thank you.
The Secretariat.
And just on that, there wasn't a written submission from the APSC?
No, Chair. We've taken the opportunity to do an opening statement that provides some written information to you, which we can table, but we haven't done a formal written submission to date.
Okay. Is there any reason for that? Or?
It was more the terms of reference, I think, for the committee. It didn't as much focus on public sector capability, and we were very pleased to respond to the invitation to appear today.
Okay. I think it's worth starting with some historical context, some of which you touched on in your opening statement before proceeding to questions here. As you flagged in your opening statement, the Australia and the Asian Century White Paper in 2012 identified the development of Asia-relevant capabilities in the Australian Public Service as a critical national objective. And the importance that it attributed to was ensuring that public decision-making is informed by a sophisticated understanding of our region, and to that end it recommended a series of specified goals. So those goals and strategies in the Asian Century White Paper included Asia capability targets within the senior leadership of the APS, development of a national strategy directed by the Secretary of PMC and the APSC, and a series of pathways for building institutional Asia capability in the APS on issues like language, understanding, exchanges and interactive programs. 7 years later, the independent review of the APS, the 30 review, came back to this and found that, quote, the ongoing shift in global economic weight to Asia presents tremendous opportunities for Australia, along with risks and significant challenges. The APS has a critical role to play in helping the government to engage with the region, to collaborate with nations in Asia on policy issues of mutual interest, and to link domestic and international aspects of policy advice and program delivery. However, quote, to do this well, the APS must deepen its experience in and knowledge of Asia. Policy officers will require a more sophisticated understanding of the region, as well as Asian language proficiency. This has been a long-standing goal of the APS. It was a focus of the Asian Century White Paper. Coordinated and sustained action to deepen Asia-relevant capabilities was not taken then and remains a skills gap across the APS. So can I ask, the initiatives that you have discussed here today, have they bridged that gap from David Thodey's assessment of there being a skills gap in the APS on Asia capability to where we are now? You know, is your assessment that the APS is today Asia capable in the context of the objectives set out in the White Paper and the Thodey Review?
Thanks for the question, Chair. It's a really good one to look back to where we've come from. I was actually leading the Australia and the Asian Century White Paper Implementation Task Force in PMC.
It was a tumultuous time.
Back in 2012, that's right, so I remember it very, very well. And I was at that point working for Dr Gordon de Brouw, who was most recently the Public Service Commissioner as well, and who was also on the 30 review. So the very short answer to the first part of your question is yes. There is a very strong thread and a continuation of understanding through all of the themes that were really drawn out in the recommendations from the Australia and the Asian Century White Paper, the work we then did at that time with the Public Service Commissioner, Public Service Commission and Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet on how do you implement recommendations around building a more culturally capable public service. That work has not been lost. That work was very much drawn from. We saw recommendations, as you've said, from the Thodey Review around this exact issue, and in implementing the government's public sector reform agenda, we've very much drawn on all of the work and the understanding and the ideas that have flowed through since that work in 2012, which then manifest in actually really effective ways in the programs that I've mentioned that we've rolled out, specifically targeting the building of Asia-Pacific capability in the Australian Public Service. One of the ways that those threads have woven through is there's very much been not an exclusive focus on public servants whose dominant or sole work is in the international sphere. So very much so there's been an understanding that for Australia's national interest, it's important that public servants across multiple portfolios, including domestic policy agencies, where their work has natural and strong connections with international community, particularly in our region. So I'm thinking particularly here, Chair, around portfolios who deal with microeconomic issues. While they are not primarily international agencies, their work is very much dependent on engagement and understanding and sharing of ideas, quite frankly, as well, with our region and countries in our region. So those ideas have very much flowed through in the programs that I talked about, where rather than just being for DFAT officials or just being for Austrade officials, we've actually deliberately targeted public servants in domestic agencies who need that capability lift and won't necessarily naturally get it as part of their day-to-day work in the same way. The design of a number of these programs has been targeting those public servants. So it's a very long answer as well as a short answer, Chair, to an excellent question. But I think we can say, yes, those themes, learnings, insights and work have definitely flowed through. We'd love to tell you about some of the results in our evaluation of the impacts of those programs, because I think it's been very successful. That kind of deep understanding that we have around it's not just language training for internationally posted public servants. It's actually much broader than that, and also goes to cultural capability as well.
Okay, so just understanding the Establish Asia and Pacific Capability Initiative.
Yes.
So the programs that you discussed under that were the Indo-Pacific Executive Development Program and the Pacific Cultural Capability Micro-Credentials.
Exactly.
Are there others? Or?
That's been our flagship programs, and we've been pretty much fully occupied with delivering those and making sure that they're successful.
So how many people have done that executive development program?
I'll pass to Ms Boxall, my colleague who manages those.
In terms of, perhaps it's of interest to think about how the APS Academy works, because sometimes we're involved in direct delivery and sometimes we're actually a curator of what's available across the system. And so they're the main programs that we've offered, and there's 129 people have done the Indo-Pacific program so far. Kristen will have information about micro-credentials, but there's an enormous amount of programs offered because we're in the Academy, we're a networked hub, so we also work alongside DFAT, work alongside other parts of the ecosystem to deliver. And if I look at the Diplomatic Academy, they've got a series of programs, and then I look at the National Intelligence Academy, they've got a series of programs. We've got 2 programs, and we've got another one about a mosaic about growing multicultural awareness. And so there's other pieces there. Then there's the National Security College, and then we look outside. So we look at actually private sector, and we look at academia as well. So we're very much designed to be that hub at the middle that sometimes amplifies what's already available. But we've been able to invite a lot of the interesting target group, and this is where, by going to 129 people in Indo-Pacific, a number of them being domestic focused, it's different to what we've done in the past, where often it was internationally focused. It was also the middle management was really critical in the delivery of that program. We targeted EL staff, high-performing EL1s and EL2 staff, to really try. That's the beauty of the Academy, is it's because it's we can do things at scale. We were able to get it to scale and build middle management capability, which was really identified as a key need for us and a key focus.
And how long did that executive development program, how long does it run?
So it's multifaceted. I'm just trying to think. It's approximately 6 months. I can get the specifics for you. Okay. But how it looks is it's got an element where we draw on e-learning from DFAT. So it was done in partnership with DFAT. And then it's got some immersive elements, and we work with AsiaLink to deliver the immersive elements, and lots of guests. Really, we bring in the region to us rather than going to the region, because that's really cost effective. So lots of really high level guest speakers. The other beauty of it is we've got people from lots and lots of agencies that wouldn't normally work together. So now they're looking at domestic policy, and they're looking at their interconnected problems that they're facing and working together to solve those interconnected problems. Then there's masterclasses, and then there's projects. So they then deliver a project at the capstone at the end in diverse agency groups. And the other strength of the program is the senior representation. Rachel herself has been there with the group Dr. De Brouwer that was mentioned previously, he was there. The Assistant Minister was there. So it's really sponsored, and there's a lot of accountability for participants when they're in the program to fully participate in the projects, but think about how they're going to change their practice when they go back to their agencies.
I know I appreciate, and I've done Asian leaders courses myself, and I think they are very worthwhile and people get a lot out of it. I'm just trying to understand the issue in the totality, though, in that, in 2019, David Thodey said there's a skills gap across the APS. He recommended in recommendation 20 that the APS should be, quote, building a workforce with deep experience in and knowledge of Asia and the Pacific. I suppose I'm trying to understand, how do we get from there to today? Is it really this one program? Like, why are we Asia capable now when we weren't then?
So I guess I'd really reinforce what Ms Boxall was saying around the APS Academy model. So the APS Academy, the way that I think about it, Chair, is that it's a delivery platform for capability uplift right across the Australian public service. And as Ms Boxall was starting to outline, it operates with a networked model. What we mean by that is there's many different partnerships that can all deliver on this single delivery platform. The other beauty of the delivery platform is that when we put learning content onto APS Learn, which is part of the architecture of the Academy, it means that there is training material and content that can be accessed by many thousands of public servants with no end date on it. So while we have the very deliberately designed more immersive experience that is cohort-based for the middle managers, because the deliberate policy rationale there is that middle managers will stay in the service for longer, they will develop and become more senior over time. It's a seminal point in their career as middle managers to really have an immersive, very high quality, high impact experience in these programs. They will play that forward, and both with their teams and as future leaders in the public service, they'll be able to direct their teams to the learning content that still is on all of our learning platforms. That might come from other partners, that might come from content that we've generated, that we have intellectual property in, but it really brings everything together to a single delivery platform that is well known and well regarded across the public service, that people know that they can go to.
I know my colleagues have some questions, so I might just, if you have information on notice, you can provide us about how you measure that Asia capability and the effectiveness of those programs.
Oh, we can talk to you now if you'd like.
I'm just letting my colleagues have questions,
sure.
So if you can provide that on notice, that
no
would
problem,
be
Chair.
very useful. The one question I asked before I hand over to colleagues is, so you've been talking about building capability within the APS. How do you think about prioritising candidates to join the APS with existing Asia capability? Is there anything in the APS grad programs or the kind of recruitment processes that reward Australians who have developed Asian language capability, Asian regional expertise, Asian international experience in employment? What is there to say to a young Australian? Invest in that and you'll be rewarded in the APS, because as you rightly point out, this is not just an internationally facing skill, this is a skill that's important across the APS.
Thanks so much for the question, Chair. It's a really good one. So the work that I mentioned on the work the Commission has done, developing the APS Culturally and Linguistically Diverse Employment Strategy and Action Plan. So that was developed and launched earlier in 2024. And the context for that plan is there are specific statutory functions set out in the Public Service Act that the Commissioner, the Public Service Commissioner, has. One of those functions is all about capability, and it's about promoting capability and developing capability within the Australian Public Service. There's another statutory function around fostering an APS workforce that reflects the diversity of the Australian population. And as you are pointing out, the pipeline of talent and where we're getting public servants from when we're recruiting, and then there's also the promotion and the opportunities question within the public service itself. They've been very important aspects of the called employment strategy. And so in terms of, we do actually have some data around the makeup of the Australian Public Service at the moment, so we can provide more details on this if it's helpful to the committee. But in our data from June 2025, 26.8% of APS employees reported their first language was not exclusively English. So that's a very headline statistic. We then have quite a bit of data on Asian language proficiency within the Australian Public Service from staff right across the workforce. So we're very happy to talk to you now about that if you're interested in that.
I'm happy for you to share it with us. I need to hand it to my colleagues, but that's a measuring exercise of the current APS. Does that advantage you? Because called doesn't always mean capability, and it's important that we are providing increased opportunities to called Australians.
That's right. It shows us our baseline. So essentially, it's this is our baseline of the current makeup of the workforce, and we know that there's more we need to do, particularly at senior executive service levels, because generally we find that at the lower levels in the public service, we're generally reasonably representative of the community that we serve in terms of called backgrounds and languages spoken. Where we see a drop-off is at senior executive service, is where we see we start to become less representative of the diversity of the Australian community. But to your question, Chair, about what are we doing about that, because of our data and what our baseline is and what the current state of play is, and our data tells us that we have a particular issue around representation in senior executive service levels. The strategy that I've mentioned sets a reportable benchmark of 24% for called representation across the Australian Public Service. Now, that's not exclusively Asia capability, obviously, but that's a target for staff from called backgrounds. But the types of actions that we're doing under the strategy and the action plan, to give you a flavour of some of those. So we're looking at how we can address barriers to recruitment. Now, we are particularly focusing on senior executive service recruitment because that's where our data tells us we are less representative. That includes things like guidance to recruitment panels, making sure that people have a deep understanding of how to address unconscious bias, for instance, on recruitment panels. We're looking at making merit list sharing easier and increasing the practice of that across the Australian Public Service, because we do have people with these skills on merit lists. We're then also looking at ways that we can invest in the capability of people who, once they are public servants already. And so we have programs that encourage leadership, nominations to leadership courses and investment. Ms Boxall can talk quite a lot about some of the measures we're doing in our talent pipelines to make sure we're getting more nominations from staff from called backgrounds, for example. We've got reverse mentoring initiatives. We're investing in 360-degree assessments so staff can get feedback and look at where they want to focus their development. We're investing in mentoring. So these are some of the strategies and actions that we're doing under that broader called strategy.
Mm-hmm. I'll hand over to colleagues now, but I will put questions on notice, noting that there is overlap between called and people who have Asia capability.
And we understand that.
But they are not the same thing.
Yeah, we understand.
So I will add some questions on notice on that. Thank you. Dr. Garland.
Oh, thank you very much. And some of what I was going to ask has been covered, so appreciate that we're all sort of on the same page. In terms of the recognition for some of this learning, obviously, there's a desire to keep people in the public sector, excellent people who are able to access a lot of the programs offered, but what does that recognition look like? And, in terms of those professional development programs, obviously, there's some particular development programs for executives and middle managers. But, in terms of, it sounds a bit more ad hoc at a more junior entry level. So I guess just, trying to understand what does that recognition look like and how do managers direct or encourage more junior levels of APS staff to take advantage of these programs, particularly when that seems where the representation of more diverse Australians in the public sector are before they drop off.
There's very many answers to that question. It's a really good question. One I'll just flag, and then I might pass to Ms Boxall to talk in a bit more detail about the actual programs themselves. But workforce planning plays an important role, which is more done at an organisation level. I know your question went to managers and how managers support more junior staff, but at the organisation level, when a department or an agency has a workforce plan and they're identifying that Asian capability is an important skill set to develop and increase, for example, in their agency. One of the things that agencies can do is find out what are the particular skill sets that are required across the job families in a particular department or agency, and then look at the talent that already exists in their workforce, understanding what skills do their staff already have. And the workforce planning, an exercise around workforce planning, is designed to match your talent to your skills needs and make sure that everything's pointed in the right direction. So one of our statutory functions at the Commission is supporting departments and agencies to do workforce management, workforce planning. And so that's, I guess, one example of the kinds of things that we would support agencies to do. But to your question around, I guess, support for learning, I'll pass to Ms Boxall.
So in the Academy, we have 3 levels of learning resources or programs available, and we have a foundation level as well as a practitioner level and then a lead level. That's how we sort of create our, segment our program so it's obvious to people where they might go. So, and in the foundation level, we're across all of, so our focus is on APS craft. So we're across things like integrity, leadership, policy, and engagement. So there's 6 craft, and I'm just not recalling the other 2 at the moment. And working in government is the one that I've missed there. So people can, at all levels, can access the foundation level, and at the in addition to that, we're trying to be, and we have increased our accessibility for people significantly since 2021 when the Academy was established. The reach of the Academy is quite extraordinary to where we started. And we offer resources. So it's not just all course-based. We've got a learning model that means that people can access events, and we have lots of master classes online that people can come to at no charge, so it's really accessible for particularly junior staff. We've got lots of e-learning, and e-learning and events is actually making up a significant portion of the offering from the Academy, growing offering at the moment. So we can reach junior staff easily through those, and because we've got this central positioning with a website, a learning management system that everyone can access, we're actually making things really accessible to those less experienced staff, and they can enrol themselves. They don't need to sort of seek permission, or so they can get to our programs quite readily.
Does that connect though with the Asian capability component?
So we would normally connect them. So that landscape, the current learning opportunities that I shared before, where I was talking about what the Diplomatic Academy offers. So sometimes they will have, so some of those are face-to-face and some of those are resource-based. So that would be where we would, that's where the intersection is, that we would be redirecting them to some resources. National Intelligence Academy has resources, National Security College has resources, things like podcasts, newsletters, articles, And the Diplomatic Academy has things like there's a skilled negotiator speaker series that's video based. So sometimes it's about us curating what's available to those at that foundation level to make sure junior staff can access things quite readily.
And it sounds a bit more self-directed though. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
We're getting close to time.
Sorry.
I'll give Mr. Soon the opportunity to ask the question he's been agitating for.
No. Thank you, Chair, and thank you to you all for your responses and your initial remarks. I might actually return back to Mr. Watts's line of questioning just around recruitment in particular. My question is just, has there been consideration given to making in selection criteria, particularly for senior leadership roles that you alluded to before, has less representation, noting your distinction of what you were mentioning before, Chair, explicit selection criteria around Asia capability, not just in departments where, say, the Department of Foreign Affairs, where that is directly relevant, but has there been consideration or guidance given that this actually be explicit selection criteria to create incentives within the structures for people to build those skills and then subsequently look to implement them in their senior leadership roles?
Thanks so much for the question. It's a really good one around incentives and how do we put incentives in that then kind of drive choices in the way people approach things. So the first part of my answer might be a bit frustrating, but then I'll come back to the benchmark. So departments and agencies, when they undertake recruitment, we at the Commission won't dictate centrally the kinds of criteria and questions that are asked for particular jobs in particular departments and agencies. So every recruitment panel needs to conform with high-level requirements under the Public Service Act, like application of the merit principle, for example. But there is no, central dictation or control over the criteria for a particular position. We would take the view that departments and agencies, and more specifically the recruitment panel that's been convened to fill a particular vacancy, will actually have the best operational understanding and be better placed to shape the selection criteria for those panels. So that would be a question that would be best answered by the agencies that you're particularly interested in. So that's the frustrating bit of my answer. But I guess what I'm coming to then is your very good question around incentives. What we're deliberately trying to do with the 24% benchmark that I mentioned that's under the called Employment Strategy and Action Plan is putting a pretty big incentive into the system. So there is public accountability essentially for how are we going with called representation in the senior executive service. Now I know that is exactly as you said, Chair, that is not the same thing as Asia capability, but we are seeing links between people's language capability, people's cultural background and their ability to deploy in a professional context, given the strong national interest in those types of capability. We would say that that benchmark and the public accountability around that 24% benchmark and the fact that we report annually on how agencies are going with their data, because we publish data annually, and it's very it would be very transparent for the public to be able to track how's that agency going with their representation against that benchmark. So we think that will be and is now an incentive in the system to increase representation. That should then drive the take-up of the guidance, the unconscious bias training, the types of things that we're making available to recruitment panels.
Thank you. And just, if I might unpick the first one a little bit, the concern that I have around it is I get that the specific organisation, the specific teams that are doing that recruitment are looking for the skills and experiences to reflect that role. But often, at least from my experience, it's caught up in the immediate situation rather than the more strategic uplift of the public service. And so whilst I get that, but if you have that individual case just replicating itself across the public service, that general uplift just doesn't happen because everyone's focused on the more immediate situation rather than the longer term strategic uplift that we're discussing.
I do take your point, and I think in part We've got strategic priorities around capability uplift, and then we've got decisions that are made at almost a team-based level and in individual performance agreements. Every public servant across the almost 200,000 strong public service will have a performance agreement and be sitting down with their managers to talk about what capability or training do I invest in my performance agreement. The messages that are sent from Secretary's Board about what is valued does really matter. And I think that's where the messages that have been sent in the response to the Thody review and the recommendations we've talked about, and the investment that's then flowed into the programs that we've developed, that's been a very strong signal from the most senior parts of the public service that this is important. Now, the flow through on that, combined with the incentive, we are seeing, really excellent results from the training and the impact that it's having. We hope there's also a magnifier benefit that people who have that investment and training pay it forward. That's actually been part of the conversation in those training programs themselves. So I absolutely take your point, and we would like to see that those incentives and the senior messages are then flowing through the system and actually shifting decision making.
Thank you. We're about at time, but in the spirit of spotlighting, as I know you do a lot of, it's been suggested to me that in the history of Federation we've only had one Asian Australian Department Secretary, Peter Varghese. Is that something that you believe to be true? Or?
I definitely have to take that on notice probably and check my facts, Chair.
I can't think of others, and I think we can all agree that that is something we can aspire to address in the future.
Yes.
Thank you for a really engaging and interesting conversation, and thank you for your attendance today. You'll be sent a copy of the transcript of your evidence and will have an opportunity to request corrections to transcription errors. Please send your responses to any questions taken on notice during this hearing to the Secretariat by close of business on Wednesday, 1st of April 2026. I now declare this hearing closed.